ultimately, I think that we all go on a journey of self-discovery, and that kind of doesn't stop, as we continue to push forward, we go on to explore new things and step out of our comfort zones. We're changing and we're growing all the time. So that aspect of self-discovery, I don't think stops. And similarly, I feel like we all continue to make mistakes sometimes, or trust the wrong people, or say or do things that we later regret, because we're human. But by equipping students with the strategies that, like you said, I wish I knew when I was a teenager, like mindfulness, meditation, and awareness of negative self-talk, and how to kind of turn that into empowering affirmations. What we do is not only heighten young people's self-awareness, but we help them to feel like they know how to move forward from challenging events.
Welcome to the Independent School Podcast. Thinking and acting strategically is the key to both securing the future of your school and helping to build a more equal and just world. My name's Juliette Corbett. I'm a consultant, speaker and facilitator specialising in helping independent schools. In this podcast, I translate tried and tested strategy and fundraising techniques into a language that works for schools. So if you're a senior leader in a private school and you want your daily work to feel less exhausting and more strategic, and if you want once more to feel the joy of making the world a better place through education, then you're in the right place. Welcome, and let's get started on this week's episode. Hello, and welcome to this episode where we're going to be talking about resilience in a crisis. I'm delighted to be joined by my guest, Emily McGuirk, to dive into this topic, which is really relevant right now. As we record this, we are fully embroiled in the invasion of Ukraine. We're seeing daily kind of news updates and images on our devices, on our TV screens, that for us adults are really challenging in terms of protecting our resilience and our well-being in this time. But it's also critical that as school leaders, we understand how to guide the young people in our care so that they can engage with the world and what's happening, but also protect their own well-being. So Emily and I talk about this topic in the conversation I'm sharing with you today. We also cover a couple of other really important topics. We actually start by talking about the importance of guiding young people on that journey of self-knowledge that we all go on through our lives, how we can give them a bit of a head start and empower them as young individuals, young people, to really supercharge their self-knowledge and their understanding about what makes them tick. And we also dive into the role of social media and how to protect ourselves from the negative sides of social media, whilst harnessing some of the real power and good that can come through networks that we can create through social media. So Emily McGuirk is going to guide us along this conversation. She is an actress, a teacher, and a health and wellness entrepreneur. And last year, she felt compelled to combine all three of these careers to create Small Steps, Big Vision. Emily champions young people to really love who they are and identify what's important to them, and then to follow that on with really solid tips and strategies and the courage to say yes to opportunities as they arise. She believes that every young person deserves the chance to live a joyful and fulfilled life. And as everyone in the school sector, we will be joining her in that belief as well. And she believes that this starts with the question, what do you like about yourself? Really important that our young people understand the positive and the unique joy that they can bring to the world because of what they bring to the table. Having experienced low self-esteem, limited self-belief and a lack of purpose, Emily herself imparts the strategies and techniques that have helped her to celebrate who she is and live a life that she now absolutely loves. And you can tell the joy that comes through Emily's voice as she's sharing this advice with us around how to help our young people in our schools to be resilient during this time of international crisis. Before we dive into the detail, I wanted to let you know about a free resource I've created to help you prepare your school for the coming economic impact of the invasion of Ukraine. It's a checklist of things you need to think about and take action on now, and it's designed to prompt strategic conversations around the issues that actually matter. You can download your free copy at www.consultjuliet.co.uk/checklist. Okay, now let's continue with this week's episode. So let's dive into this conversation with Emily. So hello, Emily, and welcome to the Independent School Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so exciting to be here today.
It's great. So this is a slightly different type of conversation to the ones we normally have on the podcast. Normally I'm here talking a lot about strategy and the importance of kind of senior leaders feeling more strategic. And today we're focusing on something which is a little bit more educational focused. And the reason I wanted to do that was because as a leader, we need to know ourselves. We need to get to know ourselves and know what makes us tick, what we're nervous about, what's inside our comfort zone, where we want to stretch that comfort zone. And a lot of those things that we develop as we kind of move through our career, as we kind of become some more senior leaders, are exactly the things that I wish I'd known about myself earlier. The things that I've learned about myself along the way that I wish I'd known as a kind of a school-age child or perhaps in my kind of 20s. Maybe to do with our values or the way we work best, the types of people we like to spend time with and so on. So, Emily, what I'm fascinated to ask you first of all is, do you think that we can help young people in our schools to arrive at a place of self-knowledge faster? Or do you think to some extent we have to all go on our unique journey kind of solo, as it were? What are your thoughts around this?
Yeah, I think it's such an important question because ultimately I think that we all go on a journey of self-discovery, and that kind of doesn't stop, as we continue to push forward, we go on to explore new things and step out of our comfort zones. We're changing and we're growing all the time. So that aspect of self-discovery, I don't think stops. And similarly, I feel like we all continue to make mistakes sometimes, or trust the wrong people, or say or do things that we later regret because we're human. But by equipping students with the strategies that, like you said, I wish I knew when I was a teenager, like mindfulness, meditation, and awareness of negative self-talk and how to kind of turn that into empowering affirmations. What we do is not only heighten young people's self-awareness, but we help them to feel like they know how to move forward from challenging events. They know how to navigate difficult relationships or setbacks that they're going to experience. So I think they're still going to have their journey of self-discovery, but hopefully it won't be so overwhelming. And I think, when you know who you are, what's important to you, what your values are that you live by, that's when the words of others, the opinions of others, which ultimately is the only thing that holds us back from doing things and experiencing things in life, it becomes far less relevant to your life, because you know who you truly are. You're the only person, not even your parents, your best friends, your husband or wife, they don't know you like you know you. So if you know that you are never intentionally going out to hurt somebody or do something that doesn't sit right with you, it's so much simpler to move on from a negative comment or move on from somebody perhaps not treating you the way that you feel you deserve to be treated.
Absolutely. And I think as educators, as the role that we play in schools has to be to equip young people to go on that journey. So you give them a head start, you give them a kind of a menu of things that they've got a basic grasp of. And my opinion on all these things is sometimes what works for one person is not going to work for everyone else. So there's a menu here. You pick and choose from that menu. You find a handful of strategies, a handful of ideas that you can explore on your own time as you go through those kind of early career stages. You figure out what you want in life, but that this starts that you're giving the young people that you're working with. God, I wish I'd had that.
Yeah, I know, me too. And when we think about what schools equip students with, it's all important stuff. So we equip students with mathematical formulas to solve mathematical problems. Similarly in science, but the teachers aren't solving those problems for them. They're empowering them to find the answers themselves. And that's ultimately, like you say, what we're trying to do, but in a more holistic form. So, if I'm equipping students with structures for morning and evening routines to help them feel good, to teach them about growth mindset, to help them bounce back from things not going how they would expected. All these things are equipping them, just as you do in school with the academic side. But this is, the whole person side of equipping them with things.
Yeah. And I think as well, there's a bit of a sense that maybe we could all just do this as parents. Like, this is the role of a parent to do some of these things. And to some extent, that's absolutely true. You don't have to be a leading, educated expert in growth mindset in order to bring your children up in a way that they feel that there aren't bounds to the way that they can grow over their lifetime. But at the same time, I think that we are getting to a point now where our understanding of limiting beliefs, of mindfulness, of the importance of morning and evening routines, habit stacking is another one I've discovered quite recently and found really helpful. How to really set goals and understand our personal vision for what we want to achieve in life. As much as a common sense person with some life experience can teach this stuff, there is also a role, isn't there, for someone who, like yourself, who has dedicated time to understanding the latest research in this area, understanding how brains work and why these things are actually really helpful for young people as they're growing through really tricky times of puberty. It's not a straightforward time of life, is it?
And that's it, and parents aren't expected to be experts in everything. They've got their own things going on as well. So it's not that, parents are negating their obligation to support and empower their children, but it's just that, that might not be something, like you said, that they've dedicated time to themselves. So, we've got to work with what we've got and what we've experienced. And I think sometimes just a little extra support goes a long way. And with all of this work, when you empower somebody and they are using strategies that, like you say, work for them, not just for everybody, but work for them, they then talk about that perhaps to their parents or to their friendship group or to their teachers. And it creates this incredible ripple effect where all of a sudden everybody starts to grow together. Everybody starts to try new things. And then the language changes.
Absolutely.
And that's so powerful.
I think you're right. There's an impact here of a community going through self-discovery as a group, isn't there? And that they can reinforce each other's choices that they're making as they go through that journey together. And I think as independent schools, what those schools have as an opportunity that state schools just don't have. One, it's the freedom over curriculum and to what extent you can build this into a regular timetable, which isn't always possible when you've got limited hours and very set curriculum in the state sector. But also there's some funding opportunities to bring in people who are really able to talk with authority and expertise and in the language that really works for the young people. So I think I've seen a lot of independent schools taking this opportunity to really help their pupils in these areas. Sometimes it gets all rolled up into just well-being, and it's much more than just that. I mean, that is a big part of it, isn't it? Resilience and well-being, but there is also something larger than that around personal vision and what it is that you want to achieve with your life. And
that's it. Yeah. And, so often young people are asked the question, what do you want to be? But rarely are they asked the question, who do you want to be? What do you want people to say about you, think about you, know you for? And I think those questions are just as important because they're so interlinked with vision, with ambition, with aspiration, and I just feel like sometimes we miss a trick there.
Yeah. And it's all wrapped up with that growth mindset as well. The fact that I get really frustrated when I speak to young people and say, I don't really know what I want to be. It's like, who really knows what they want to be age 15? I mean, honestly. And the younger people that then actually achieve that and then that makes them happy, must be a very small number of people. What's much more useful is having that growth mindset that you say, well, this is something I want to do, and I'm going to focus the next kind of 5 years on this area, whether that's a career or whether that's something extracurricular extracurricular or something, voluntary work, whatever it is you're going to focus in on. And it's absolutely fine to then switch later. Not a problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find
And having that as an expectation, that you will
precisely.
probably do a variety of different things that you love. And that's great. That's exciting.
Yeah, and that mirrors in sometimes the work that I do with school leaders as well. So I work with some teachers who have then become fundraisers, or with teachers who have then risen up the ranks and they become senior school leaders, but they know they've got a little bit of a gap in their knowledge and their understanding because they've made that switch along the way from being predominantly classroom focused to being predominantly leadership focused. And so I think all of us feel that sense of the change and shift, and then the ability to be supported really positively through that journey.
Yeah.
Returning now to the life that our young people live, the pace of life, but importantly the social media, it's so completely different from the way that I experienced my kind of school days. And it seems to me from the outside that it is harder these days for young people because social media makes everything a little bit more heightened emotionally. It's in your life constantly. You don't just walk away from school, you have your social media with you. It does seem more difficult. Do you agree with that? Is that something you've seen?
Yeah, and I think it's so hard, isn't it? Because there's so many, there are definitely positives. And even with social media, like I absolutely love social media, but I love it because I use it in a way to inspire me, motivate me, and empower me. And, I'll give a few top tips for that kind of as we go. But I think the danger is, like you said, there's no getting away from it. So when it's 24/7 opportunities for either bullying or comparison, and both of those are equally as risky. If someone had been mean to me at school, when I was in secondary school, I could go home, put the TV on, forget about it, be with my family and just focus in on that. But you can't do that now with social media. In theory, the bullying can continue and continue to be online for however long, and you've got no say in that other than blocking that person, which young people are quite reluctant to do. This is really hard for parents as well because they're in a position where they either take social media away completely, which isn't going to help. It's just putting a plaster on it. That's not going to help this situation. Or you just find yourself finding it so difficult to protect them. But I think comparison for me is the most worrying of the social media pitfalls because there are very few images out there on social media or even videos. Like, technology is just phenomenal, but that are actually real. We know they're curated, we know they're filtered, they're posed, they're timed. And young people, they know this too. Like, they will tell me, I know that none of this is real, but it doesn't stop them still from comparing what they see in the mirror to these filtered, photoshopped images on Instagram. Even when you take a photo and you haven't filtered it, because of the way that the lens works, it still doesn't look like your actual skin that you're seeing in the mirror. So it's so challenging, to remind yourself on a daily basis, this isn't real, because when you're constantly looking at these images, you're almost brainwashing yourself to have the expectation of that is what is real. And it's not just the image side of it. When I was at school, I only knew if my friend had been on a holiday or done something fun with their family if they told me about it. And generally they might mention it, but then we moved on to something else. It wasn't fixed in my brain of all these fun opportunities that they were doing and that I wasn't. So now what happens is we're not only comparing image, we're comparing lives, homes, opportunities, families, friends to everybody else's, and even strangers that we don't know. And the reason why this worries me and why I feel this is dangerous is because we're setting ourselves up to think that every friendship, every relationship, outfit, day out, weekend has to be this exhilarating version of perfect. And this just isn't the case. I mean, can you imagine if life was all the time adventure, fun, excitement?
I'd be exhausted completely.
Exactly.
I need some downtime watching TV in my pajamas, let's be honest.
Exactly. But when we constantly compare our lives to others like this, we miss out on joy.
Yeah.
We miss out on the love, on the opportunities presented to us, because we're too busy comparing it to what we think it should be like, or think it should look like.
And I'm reminded, when you're mentioning that about the comparison and the downside of comparison, I'm reminded one of my very early mentors in my career said, never compare your inside to somebody else's outside. And she wasn't talking about social media back then particularly. She was just talking about, the people you meet in a room. Don't compare what you're thinking internally to what they are projecting externally. But it's kind of supercharged through social media. So you mentioned some top tips. I'm fascinated. Give me some. How can we set? It's about boundaries, some of this, isn't it?
Exactly. And that's it, So firstly, unfollow anybody or anything or any page that doesn't make you feel good. Like we're glutton for punishment, aren't we? Sometimes we indulge in the things where, oh, that's not what I'm like, or oh, I wish. Just unfollow them. If it doesn't make you feel good, unfollow. And instead follow people who inspire you, have the same interests as you. So like if you're really interested in hockey and that's what you do for your hobbies, follow professional hockey players and look at what they're doing, what they're eating, what they're reading, so that you can learn and be inspired by them. And also hopefully meet like-minded people as well who are also interested in that. Social media is a great place to make friends, as long as you're doing it safely and your expectations are realistic.
It's about
and being empowered with like-minded people.
It's about being empowered to curate your own social media, isn't it? I mean, you have a lot of influence with these algorithms. It's hard, it's easy to just kind of hand over the power, but actually you have the power. They use the way that you interact and the type of people and the comments that you're responding to then give you more of what you want. So you can curate this information.
And that's it. And I guess that goes on to like my final tip is that, ask when you're posting, you can be part of the change. So rather than, young people they're seeing so many images of just a face doing a pose. And does that actually add any value in this world? I don't know. I don't know. Personally, not for me. That's not what I look for. That's not what I'm inspired by. So instead, every time you go to post on social media, ask yourself, okay, what value am I adding here? It might be that it's to entertain. It might be to show friendship. You might have those things trickle in, but ultimately, I always like to think, what is somebody learning from this, or how am I inspiring somebody here, or what facts can I impart on somebody, or what way can I challenge somebody to perhaps think a bit differently? And you might get negativity, you might do, but you protect yourself from that. You either make your profile private or you just block those people and you focus on the good things. If you're putting yourself out there, you are putting yourself out there. But ask yourself, what value am I adding? And then, imagine if all school children were doing that. Imagine how we could be inspiring each other and supporting each other and finding out things that we never knew about each other. And it could be this incredibly collaborative and creative space.
Yeah, completely. I double thumbs up to everything you just put there. absolutely. And we've been through a pretty tricky couple of years. So obviously the impact of the pandemic, it's been a real roller coaster over the last couple of years, really hard on a lot of young people. And now, of course, we're seeing the impact of the invasion of Ukraine. And for a lot of young people, that's their first exposure to war, potentially, or at least the first exposure to this close to home as we sit here in Europe. And it's being streamed onto devices. And even though schools can influence the way these issues are discussed in the classroom and in assemblies and so on, there's a sense of needing to add resilience to our young people to cope with these really tricky, difficult situations. Do you have any advice for adding resilience and helping young people to really face these types of crises?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as humans, it's incredibly difficult not to feel deeply about what is happening in Ukraine,
Yeah.
particularly because a couple of weeks ago, you know, they were just like us, going to
Yeah.
school, to work, making plans for the weekend, and in a day, everything changed. So for us looking in, there are definitely things that we can do to prevent feelings of overwhelm, but also guilt. Like the narrative that I've been hearing a lot is, you know, I'm going home and cuddling my children and washing my face and painting my nails, or whatever it is that you do when you're at home, just living a normal life, whilst people are really suffering and going through extreme crisis and uncertainty. And so I think the first thing to say is it's okay to still feel joy and to acknowledge that. It doesn't mean that you don't care, it doesn't mean that you don't have empathy, but it is okay to still experience moments of joy in your life. And secondly, you know, it's creating this boundary, this sense of boundaries. You know, like you said, there is such a barrage of news, and we could hear it 24 hours a day if we wanted to, on the TV, on the radio, or from our phones. Like I've had to turn my news alerts off because it's just constant, and I almost feel like I can't move forward from it if I'm constantly being reminded of the next horrendous thing. If I'm consuming it all the time, because initially I was watching every news update because I
as
felt
many of
it
us
was
were.
Yeah, exactly. I felt it was so important to be well informed. I didn't want to ignore what was going on, but listening over and over to the news almost brainwashed my mind to miss anything positive or good that was happening.
Yeah.
And the love, the joy, the positive moments happening around me were just kind of dissolving. And you know, the weight of what is going on is heavy. And so acknowledging that, I think, is important, because then you have an awareness of how much you can take. Some people can watch it on repeat. I know that for me, I am very, I would say, sensitive to issues like this. So I know that I have to limit myself. And you know, one way that, when your mind is working over and over, and this isn't just for this crisis and this tragedy, but just in general, you know, if you know that your mind is going over and over and over on something, journal it. So don't worry about spelling or punctuation, just get it out on paper, because when you're feeling heavy or low or overwhelmed, by transferring those thoughts from your mind to paper, it's almost like showering dirt off, you know. It cleanses your mind of the burden that you're going over, because you're like, right, I'm dealing with this now. It's on that paper. So that's another strategy. And then gratitude is just such a big one, because it's impossible to feel truly grateful for something and negative, low, sad, resentful, bitter. It's impossible to do that. Now, it might only be for 5 seconds that you feel that intense gratitude, because it's not a feeling that we can like truly hold on to for long periods of time, but we can get better at it and more practiced at it. But if anything, you know, tragedies like this can bring us back to the things that we take for granted so freely, you know, the freedom to live our days, to watch our children find joy in seeing an aeroplane rather than fearing it could drop a bomb, going to bed feeling safe, warm, loved. And there are lots of different ways that people do gratitude, but 2 of them is one, just before you go to bed, so that the last thing your brain is thinking about before you go to sleep is to just list 3 things that you're either grateful for, or a person that you're grateful for in your life, or something positive and fun that happened in that day, so that your mind is going to bed calmer and thinking of good things and positive things and things that bring you joy, rather than what you've been thinking about during the day, you know, and faced with and worrying about. But you can also, if you prefer to journal those things, or write, I am grateful for because it improves my life in this way. Again, it all does the same thing, and it's whatever works best for you. So gratitude is a brilliant one to just bring you back to center. And then I think the last thing that I would suggest is some form of action, because when we worry about things, it's generally because we're not taking action in that direction. So for example, you might worry about your English GCSE a lot more when you're not actively studying for your English GCSE. And the same is with this. So to alleviate those feelings of guilt, worry, overwhelm, think about the things that you could do to in some way. So you could draw a Ukrainian flag and put it on your window to show solidarity in case there's somebody, you know, in your street, in your town that has connections with Ukraine. You could do a sponsored walk and raise money for the Red Cross. You could go through your wardrobe and donate clothes that no longer fit you. You know, there are things that we can do, and they don't all have to be about donating money, because that, you know, that can be a real challenge, especially now with everything so uncertain. But there are things that you can do, and when you're in a place of action or activity, it's much harder to focus on worry and anxiety and fear of things that haven't yet happened, you know, like, so I feel like taking action in some way is such a great way to make things more positive and to alleviate those feelings.
I couldn't agree more. That's a fantastic list. And I think one of the things that immediately comes to mind for me is your first comment there about it's okay to still feel joy and not to feel the guilt. And I think limiting exposure is really important there, and that everyone will have their own limits to what they find it helpful to consume and what they then find is tipping over into being an unhelpful consumption of media information. And one of the things that strikes me then is a reminder of something I learned actually when I was learning mindfulness, was the difference between empathy and compassion. And too much empathy sounds like a great thing. It is a great thing. But when you're feeling empathy, you are feeling a visceral emotional connection as if you are suffering in the same way as someone else. Now there's a real limit to how much you can do that and still be positive about the world and get on with your day. So to limit that empathy to some extent and replace it instead with compassion, which is a slightly more arm's length sense of, I can see your suffering and I will take action as I can to alleviate it, but it's not allowing it to come quite so close to your own heart, basically. And I've always found that as being a very, very helpful way of differentiating between what I allow to come close to me and I can then respond to and I can feel compassion for, is very different to what I allow to be completely internalized within me, because I find that really quite overwhelming and prevents me from then taking the action. And as you said at the end there, taking action, I think, is what helps a lot of people. And I think what we have to understand is that if all of us can take some small action, it will add up. And sometimes that action is being defiant by continuing with a joyful day in a democracy in which we are free to do those sorts of things. There may be additional actions that are in there, as you've mentioned there, you do with doing sponsored walks, putting up Ukrainian flags and things like that. I mean, I wrote to my MP yesterday with, I won't share my views because I don't do politics on this podcast, but with my views on what we could be doing differently in terms of at the government level, what we could be doing more. And hopefully he'll read it. I don't know. Someone in his staff will read it, but it made me feel like at least I was taking some action. And so I think that list is really important, that it's okay to feel joy. Journaling, feeling that gratitude and then taking action, I think is a fantastic way that we can ourselves come through this with resilience, but also to help our young people within those schools within our schools to overcome sense of helplessness or a sense of overwhelm at a time like this.
And that's right, you know, and when we do feel so deeply, children, young people, they're so sensitive like it. They're like a sponge, you know, they can't help but kind of take on what we are feeling. So the best way I think that we can help our young people, you know, my children are very young, they're 3 and they're 5, but working with young people as well, I think it's all the same, like by showing that resilience, by showing that we are human and we do feel things, and this is a challenging time, but these are the things that we're doing to move ourselves forward and to keep living. And like you say, you know, not feel like we are the ones that are repressed, you know, by just demonstrating that and modeling that, it's so powerful, and it can't help but ripple into all the young people that we come into contact with.
Yeah, and that brings us a little bit back around to, as we were saying at the beginning, this is a ripple effect through the communities, school communities as well. My sense that we as a community are feeling gratitude for what is positive in our lives, taking action, feeling that we are acting together as a community is a really important way of helping young people to come through difficult times like this. So, Emily, give us a little bit more information. How do you work with schools? What kind of work do you do with schools?
Yeah, so schools basically invite me in to deliver interactive workshops where, in a nutshell, I champion young people to identify what they like about themselves. You wouldn't believe how many students are like nothing, but it's because they're not asked that question. But when we start to look into it and to encourage everybody to celebrate what makes them special and what makes them unique and what makes them amazing, it changes the way that they sit, it changes the way that they stand, it changes the way that they interact with each other. And it is deeply, deeply sad for me when I hear so many students say nothing, or oh, there's nothing good about me. But and what I say to them is that I don't believe that is actually the truth. I think you've just never been asked, that you've never thought about it, and that's the difference. So I encourage them to question what holds them back from celebrating success, what holds them back from actually doing things that they want to do, or they want to say, or they want to put themselves forward for. And generally it is the fear of what other people think, or the fear of failure. And we talk about that, and I give them then the practical strategies to boost their confidence so that they have the courage to go for opportunities. So the workshops are really interactive. I talk about my kind of experiences, like how I came to this work, that I was really challenged by comparison, because I was an actress, I was a teacher, and now I do this work with young people to kind of teach them the things that I wish I'd known as a teenager. So, people can reach me at emily@smallstepsbigvision.com, or contact me via my website, which is just smallstepsbigvision.com. And then I kind of talk with the individual schools about what they feel their students need, and I tailor a workshop specifically for them. And I just love it. It's been amazing. Yeah. So
I can hear, and I knew, which is why I invited you to join us on this podcast. I can feel the joy that this work brings you as well in the work that you're doing. And I know that this is something that you feel really commitment towards. And so I think it's a wonderful example of the fact that you have found a way that you can take the experiences that you've had in the previous stages of your career and then transition into what you're doing now. I think it's absolutely fantastic. I will put those contact details into the episode notes so that people could easily click on them. Thank you so much, Emily, for your time today. It's been fantastic, and I think really timely as well to be talking about all of these areas where young people, it's not just resilience and well-being, but there's an important strand of that, but around discovering themselves, self-belief, understanding about what a growth mindset can do in terms of the way they can transition through different stages of their life as they go through their careers and through their family life and so on. I think this is really important work. So thank you, Emily, and also to be reminded of the connections between how this helps leaders and how we are all still learning these things as we go. Self-discovery never finishes. And to reflect on it myself with you has been really, really interesting. So thank you so much for joining us today, Emily.
Oh, thank you for having me. Have a fabulous week.
Thanks for listening to the Independent School Podcast, the podcast that helps senior leaders in private schools to think and act more strategically, both because they want to secure the future of their school and because they want to help build a more equal and just world. You can listen in everywhere that podcasts are available. And if you want to catch up on previous episodes or follow any of the links that I've mentioned today, just head over to www.consultjuliet.co.uk/podcast.